Don't you dare click that remote. Don't you turn this in any way. That is, we're going to have such a good show, you know. I mean, Public Affairs has been doing this for now 16 years, 806 shows. This very well could be the best show, our 807th show. We have Dennis Gragert here. He is, of course, everybody would know about the Daily Whale. Read it at dailywhale.com. If you're really hip, you're getting a morning and afternoon newsletter from the Daily Whale. Right, Dennis?
That's right.
Because it's the hippest thing in town. If you want to know about what's going on in government and politics and business and the intersection of those things here in Cook County and Chicago and Illinois, you better be reading that or you're going to be really, really, really behind. And if you click that and you don't watch this show, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show. You're going to learn all about politics, what went on in the governor's election, why Rauner won, why he only won by 3 points, and oh, so much more, and who's going to be the next governor of the state of Illinois. Don't click that remote, because if you do, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show. Now they got it on me for some reason. Okay. You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And it's a slow start, folks, but it's going to be a fast show, really fast, okay? I got so engrossed in those books we were looking at the beginning of the show. There's Milton Friedman, there's The Essence of Milton Friedman, there's Milton Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom. That's what you were saying, okay, and Free to Choose. We won't go through that. This show is not going to be about that because our guest, as I mentioned, is Dennis Gragert. More about Dennis as we get into the show, but you know what you should know is, other than being the publisher of the dailywhale.com, he is also somebody who oversees a consulting firm that does op research for Democrats outside of Illinois, so there won't be any conflict across the country. He's the guy who digs up the dirt. I'm going to find out, did he dig up the nitty-gritty, the dirt on Jack Ryan back in 2004? Is he responsible for Barack Obama winning the U.S. Senate race, winning the Democratic primary, and then winning the U.S. Senate race, and then going on to be president? He could be a kingmaker. But we're not going to start with something like that, now that we've teased you. Dennis, why did Bruce Rauner win only by 3 points? The poll said he was going to win by 20 points. This guy Berkowitz is really nuts. A month before the election, he said Rauner's going to win by 20 points. Why did Rauner only win by 3 points?
Well, Rauner was new to the political sphere, and so while he spent a lot of money introducing himself to the voters and talking to the voters, they didn't really know him. And so as the race developed toward the end, and there were within the primary, there were people that had, looking for someone else to vote for, and that vote pretty much consolidated around Kirk Dillard, and there was a lot of help, I would say, to kind of get people there. But I think that's the thing. Well, so it's not surprising that he couldn't, win by 20%.
So if the question is, how did Dillard close the gap with Rauner? The answer, and people are going to see this, powerful union bosses.
Well, they certainly helped.
Kind of ironic, because Rauner was going after these powerful union bosses. He said, I'm not anti-union, but I am he said, I'm anti-union bosses. Yeah. And the bosses came after Bruce Rauner, didn't they?
Well, there's a lot of at stake for the unions in this election, and
public sector unions, private sector, both?
Well, I would say both. I mean, certainly he has tried to make a distinction in his campaign, but overall, his background would suggest that he's going to be very much on the business and management side of the ledger than the union side of the ledger. And so they did help Dillard a lot with their money and pumped
$6-8 million of ads, negative ads, right?
They pumped a lot of
money. Some of these were independent expenditure groups, but basically it was motivated by unions and union money, right. And union people out there. And so they were doing these ads that said Rauner's a terrible guy because his company invested in nursing homes and people died because they were inadequately staffed. Basically, they said Rauner killed people. I mean, politics ain't beanbag in Chicago and anywhere, but especially in Chicago. So basically they said, Bruce killed people.
Right.
Am I overstating it?
No, I think that
How
was
would
the
you like
impression.
it if you were running for office and somebody was saying, Dennis basically killed people?
Well, I wouldn't like it. That's why I'm not running for office. Because
But you're the guy who digs up opposition research, so you could have been the guy who dug up, because you don't work on Illinois stuff, and because you don't want a conflict,
Right.
but for that, you could have been the guy who would have dug up that GTCR, Rauner's company, invested in Medicare companies, some of those were understaffed, it was claimed in lawsuits that people died as a result. That would have been you digging that stuff up, right?
No doubt.
I just want people to know who they're dealing with here.
Right. So that is correct. And again, this is not about what I would not run, because I wouldn't want to accept the scrutiny. If you run, this is the scrutiny that you should.
It's fair. It's fair.
It's part of his background, and
Okay.
certainly in the political gamesmanship, things get ugly, and we're going to see, I think, a considerable more ugliness in this campaign between Governor Quinn and Governor Rauner.
So powerful union bosses were a factor. What about the family values crowd? Because these people, they looked at it, they really didn't like Rauner because he never quite said, but he pretty much said he was pro-choice on abortion. Would you say that's fair? He didn't quite say, but he did say. His wife is certainly pro-choice on abortion.
Yeah, I don't
Right?
know. I don't know. Actually,
You don't know his
her
wife?
opinion.
Yeah.
I know her wife. I mean, I know.
You haven't really talked.
I
What's her
haven't
name?
Diana,
Something?
Yeah,
I don't know.
something
Someone
like that. Yeah. But I don't.
Well, what do you know? Do we know that Bruce is pro-choice on abortion? How could we go through a whole primary campaign and not know the guy's position on
That's
abortion?
why he was very effective in staying on message. That's
So you're
one
saying
thing.
he may not be pro-choice, he could be pro-life in your view?
I think that he didn't want to talk about it in the primary. My speculation is that he will be, try not to talk about it a lot.
But he
insofar as
probably,
he does,
look, just between us girls, he is probably pro-choice, right?
Yes, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what he is. I would guess that his campaign, insofar as it's talking about it, it's going to try to pick a moderate stance on the issue.
But just between us girls, if you had to say, I'm trying to get an answer
Yeah,
for you.
probably.
He's probably
I don't-
pro-choice
We're
on
speculating
abortion.
about someone I don't know, but yes, if I was to.
Well, you lived in Illinois, you voted, right? You did vote, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Let me just,
100%.
did you vote for Rauner?
Did I vote for?
Oh, you
Rauner?
voted in the Democratic primary, right?
You know what?
You didn't cross over, you didn't listen to the union bosses and cross over and vote in the Republican primary for Kirk Dillard, so you'd have an easier person to beat?
No, that wasn't me.
Isn't that what the union bosses were saying, right?
The union bosses were saying that, but one of the things I don't know how effective they were at moving people across. I think the people that came across for Dillard weren't people that were being directed by union bosses. I think they were people what used to be called Reagan Democrats. They're conservative. They even downstate. They can vote in the Democratic primary. They may vote for a Democratic president, but giving a compelling reason to vote in a Republican primary, not because unions want to, because there's a competitive race. And they want to see somebody or against somebody, I think that's where they'll.
Wouldn't they, before the unions got into it, wouldn't those Reagan Democrats, seeing in the Democratic primary, there wasn't really a race.
Right.
There was this guy who got 23%, right? What was his name?
Tio Hardeman.
Yeah, Tio Hardeman wasn't really a serious candidate, so it wasn't like when they had Dan Hines running against Pat Quinn.
Exactly.
So if you're a Democrat and you're a Reagan Democrat, you might say, okay, I'll vote in the Republican primary where it's more interesting without anybody telling you anything.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you vote, your guy would probably be Rauner if you're a Reagan Democrat. I mean, he's big on growth, he's big on economic growth, that was what Reagan was sort of like a Jack Kemp Democrat, same thing. Hope, growth, and opportunity. That's what Rose Rauner was about, right? That's what Jack Kemp was about, and basically that's what Ronald Reagan was about, right? Hope, growth, and opportunity.
All true, but I think there are also people that were just concerned about his wealth and what that would mean in his overall perspective.
Ronald Reagan was pretty wealthy, wasn't he?
Well,
he had this big ranch out there. Not like the same way.
It's not the same
Okay,
scale.
so because he had that wealth, you're saying Reagan probably was. Rauner was probably not the choice of the Reagan Democrats in Illinois because of that wealth.
Comparing Reagan to Rauner is just that's
tough. That's
not
hard
really
sell.
relevant. I mean, Reagan was a
So who's the
master
choice?
spokesman, politician. Rauner is someone that just recently has been a very successful businessman who's now coming on ours.
Right, it's a stretch, I realize, okay,
Yeah.
to make that analogy. But let me just ask you, then, before the unions got into this, if you were a Reagan Democrat, who do you suppose the Reagan Democrats would favor if they were going to vote in the Republican primary for governor? Before the union bosses started pushing them one way or the other.
I mean, I don't know how much the union bosses were pushing.
We'll put that
those
aside.
people,
Okay,
but
just
I just
who do you think the Reagan Democrats on their own
on
would
their
vote
own?
for in the Republican primary for
Well,
governor?
I agree with you that Rauner's economic message is similar.
So that would
to
have some
laissez-faire.
attraction.
It would have some attraction.
But what?
But at the end of the day, when you're looking at if you're sitting out there, you're looking at negative ads. You're looking at someone who's being pushed as out of touch. These are people that would be in support of the minimum wage increase. So I think those are people who probably.
The Reagan Democrats would be supportive of the minimum wage increase.
So I think there would be a series of things that would cause them to say not Bruce Rauner, and then they're looking for the next guy up.
And who's that guy?
Well, in this case, it was Dillard.
Is that because some of these Reagan Democrats are possibly pro-life?
No, I think
and
that's where
they're sort of social conservatives.
I think that's where the money that was spent to attack Rauner and to
support, and also some of that money to attack Rauner was also to support Dillard. And you're saying some of these Reagan Democrats.
So he had the benefit of the most money, and so I think that's that he became the second choice. Dillard. He became the second choice.
Because Brady had no money.
No money, it just blew up for him. So
Dillard became. And Dan Rutherford, of course, imploded
Same issue.
because of that sexual harassment complaint and other.
He could have been the second. I mean, races oftentimes there's a first and a second, and there's
so we kind of come down to. So you're saying Reagan Democrats moving toward Dillard. Union bosses doing the negative ads,
on the money.
And also crossover votes. Union bosses trying to get, telling Democrats.
I'm skeptical.
If they said that, well, you don't think it was that?
I'm skeptical. I'm sure there are examples of it, but I'm skeptical of like a lot of Democrats going over to try to.
Did you look at the numbers in Sangamon County? Tell people about Sangamon County. You're a pro in this business.
Well, I have not seen the numbers in Sangamon County.
No, but tell people about Sangamon County. Why is that something of importance in general to politicians? Where is Sangamon County?
Springfield, our state capital, is in Sangamon County, and it's like a priori, and I think it's a mix. It's a little bit conservative, but you've got the university there, and so it is somewhat of a representative mix of our.
Has a lot of government workers, right?
And it has a lot of government workers.
They have state employee pensions.
But our city has a lot of government workers.
Okay, but they have state employee pensions.
Right.
The city has city employee pensions. Right. Rauner, people might say he would push Emanuel or push other legislators, but right now, the people who've been affected by what Rauner wants, which is to push back that. And if you look, I think you'll find in Sangamon County, Dillard did extremely well relative to Rauner. So, and also there were more Democratic votes. Well, if you look at the numbers, it appears Democrats were voting in the Republican primary in Sangamon County.
What I would say, I mean, if you look at
I think.
I'm not saying there weren't people that were doing it, particularly people with that stake.
All you need is excuse me, but you need he only won by, what was it, 23,000 votes? I think that was the margin. I'm not sure. Maybe it was 28,000. It was in the 20s. Right. Well, if you get 10,000 votes, people, that may not sound like a lot because we've got 13 million people, and in a general election, the winner gets 1.8 to 2 million. 10,000 is nothing. But in the Republican primary, Rauner won, I think, with about 323,000 votes. And that means if you give him 10,000 votes that he's not going to get, that's a good chunk. And if you look at Cook County, where Rauner did well, and Lake County, those were sort of his bases, and I think he did reasonably well in Chicago. But your guy, somebody writing in the dailywhale.com this morning, we're taping this on March 23rd. I got the benefit of my free copy. You can sign up and get, if you go to dailywhale.com, it's not like favoritism toward me. This wasn't pay to play. You can get this because you can sign up for 30 days and get a free deal, and then just go on to the next thing. No, stay with dailywhale.com. No, but seriously, so I'm reading this, and somebody writing, now this was not, I think, original content. Right. This is part of what you folks do. You aggregate, you pick up things. Right. You picked up this article, and this was good. I can't remember, I should give the person credit, but he had a lot of numbers as to the votes throughout the state of Illinois and how people had done. Okay.
Well, I mean, again, you're talking about Springfield, you're talking about government workers, but I think these government workers are the same. They're downstate. They tend to be a little conservative. So I think some of them have been voting in, Democratic with the Democratic part
They
of
may have done it
leadership.
anyway, is what you're saying.
I'm
without
just
the
saying that
pushing.
they're not hard. I mean,
They're not hard Democrats.
There's
necessarily.
certainly some that did it, but I think there's
They're also swing Democrats
there's
who may
swing.
go back and
That's-
forth,
that would-
take different ballots,
It's something.
and maybe even vote Democratic or Republican in the general election, is what you're saying.
Right.
These, you were about to say probably hard R's. Explain to people what hard R's or hard D's are.
Well, someone that is, they pull every year they pull a Democratic or Republican ballot when there's an opportunity to
Right.
vote.
So people usually look back 4 elections, as I remember this. If you've ever been a
right.
precinct captain, one day in the sad past I was. And so you go around with these lists, and the last 4 elections you're looking at, and it tells you the person pulled a Democratic ballot maybe in the last 4, every 2 years. They pulled a Democratic, they're 4 Ds, they're a hard D, or they pulled a Republican ballot. This is all public, folks. They can find this out about you. So they're a hard D, meaning they're consistent Democrat, hard R, Republican, or in your case, we're talking about people in Sangamon County who you're saying in Springfield, where there are a lot, may take 2 Democratic ballots, 2 Republican ballots.
Right. And if
And
you're-
also, we don't know, because we don't know how they voted. They may have voted for Democrats twice
And
and
if you're in this,
Republicans
if you're a
twice.
state employee and you can see what's the debate around the pensions, and you would be a compelling reason to pull a Republican ballot if you pulled a Democratic ballot every year of your life. But that's very few people are motivated in that way. I mean, very few people are voting, so it's really hard to get people to jump across. They know someone on the ballot they want to vote for, and you can't vote for both sides. So there was certainly numbers anecdotally.
Okay.
So.
Well, how does Rauner beat Pat Quinn? I mean, because you are, these days, you're pretty balanced because you're running, as you say, dailywhale.com. You try to be balanced in that. And that, folks, is about the intersection of government and politics and business. You do some original content in these newsletters that you put out and on your website, dailywhale.com, but you also aggregate stuff. So you look for RFPs, requests for bids, and if Cook County's looking to hire somebody to do something for them, or the city of Chicago is issuing a request for bid, or the state of Illinois, you do that because your readers want to know. And you have how many? What, 300, almost 300 subscribers?
Yeah, 300 subscribers is going out about 1,000 people. So.
Okay. Because some of those subscribers have 2 or 3, and you give people breaks. It's about, what, $270 for a subscription for your first, but then if you're the same entity and you want to get a second or third, you give a little discount, right?
Right.
Basically, he's a rich man. I won't go through the math. This guy is like a rich man. Be very nice to him, right? If you see him at the City Club of Chicago, where I met you, and by the way, City Club of Chicago, fantastic organization. Go to that site, go to the events. We really, look, I got my, people don't know this, I basically started by going there and asking questions. And then they came up with a rule that I can't ask any questions. That's a whole
Oh,
other
they
story.
made that rule for you?
That was it. There really basically was. I'm not kidding. That's a whole other. But anyway, I love those guys and I love the organization, and you get fantastic lunch and you get great speakers. Someday you'll be speaking there.
Well, so yeah, well, City Club is terrific, and they do good things.
Okay.
Back to your question about how, I mean, because how does Rauner win this?
Right.
How do they put together? It's interesting. I mean, their money is not going to be an issue for either campaign. So Rauner's going to have more.
Quinn's going to have a lot of money. Rauner's got a lot of his own, his rich friends.
So it's not a become kind of money.
How does he win? How does he win? Tell him how to win.
He's got to come across as appealing to the voters, as someone that cares about where they are, not just a small set of Republicans who are very concerned about the direction of the state and are ready to do anything they can to change the direction of the state. He's got to become more real, and the challenge for him in doing that is it's hard to do that exclusively through television ads. And so part of his path is to become out there.
And how, you mean just going out and
Being
doing
available,
retail?
just being available, talking.
Coming
to
on
people.
a show like Public Affairs would be very good for him, right?
Being on this show would be a great idea for him. That's exactly the kind of thing he needs to do.
Because that's earned media, that's not paid media. If they see Bruce here saying things, he's got to persuade people.
It's got to, and it's persuade them.
And
So-
you know, Bruce, we tape here in Skokie for a while. We may be taping in Evanston. We may be taping in Mount Prospect. We're going to be vagabond for a bit.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be too far from you, and we'll come to you, Bruce. We'll come to your house. I used to live in Winnetka. So just to pitch, Mr. Rauner, we'd like Pat Quinn to be here too. Well, Pat's never been here either. So.
Right. So right. That would be.
Pat needs to do that too.
Well, that's the thing.
Let's stick to Rauner. Okay.
But
So
so
Rauner,
back to Rauner. I think that's a big thing. And then because there's the voters, the press, have a lot of questions about what are his plans. He's got to walk a fine line between being sincere and talking about stuff, but it is also true that it is not to his advantage to give every little detail about what he's planning in government, because those things will become points of criticism through the course of the campaign. So that's the balance.
But in the Republican primary, if you'd gone, did you go to these Republican primary forums?
Yep.
Do you remember he said there are 4 points, there are 4 things I want to do?
Yeah.
Remember what they were?
I don't remember what they were.
Well, let's see if collectively we can.
There was
pension reform,
better education,
term limits,
and
taxes, lower
you said
taxes.
It was going to be a test.
Lower taxes, lower spending. It's kind of,
So
some of
that was
those
for the
sounds like
budget.
more than 4, but basically, so he kept talking, and economic opportunities. So basically, it's, term limits. That was a big deal.
Right.
Pension reform.
Pension reform.
He said this pension reform that passed was not a fix. We
Right.
need a real fix.
Right.
We need to keep taxes low. We need to keep state spending low. We need to give people job prospects, economic growth.
And all those.
So that's basically,
that's
his platform.
That's a really good platform and a very good platform in the Republican primary. The problem is, if I'm just a middle of the road voter, I don't see much in there for me.
Really?
I may want term limits, but that doesn't really do anything for me.
Don't you feel like there's pay to play going on in
There
the state of
is.
Illinois,
And I
and
want
term limits will maybe get rid of some of that and make government a little cleaner.
All
And
true.
for you, if there's less corruption, sometimes people say in Illinois there's a 10%, 20% corruption tax. Corporations don't come here.
Right.
If they come here and they offer you jobs, isn't that something for you, the middle guy, the middle class guy,
Well, and
middle income guy?
there are things in there, and I think you'd say there's something indirectly or one step removed. I mean, those things might be appealing to me.
What do you want? If you said nothing
No,
for
not
you,
me.
do you tell me? No. What do you tell me? What should be there for the middle income guy
Well,
or middle class, however you want to put
Let me
it?
just say, I'm not so much articulating what should be. I'm just trying to give you the perspective of what
You said
they're
it
listening
wasn't
for.
there, but I'm saying you would have an idea.
Well,
Give me
here's
something.
an example. Minimum
Okay.
wage is an example.
You
right?
think that's the middle income guy?
I
a
think-
$7.25 minimum wage on the
because
federal level.
because that guy has a kid that's been trying to get a job.
Oh, so that middle class
It's
guy wants a minimum wage job
Not a
for
minimum
his
for
kid.
his job. Right now, he knows his kid's making a minimum wage job at
Right.
8.
So what does he want? You're saying that guy wants you to raise the minimum wage
I'm
for
saying
his
if I
kid?
have a choice between you giving me term limits or you give me minimum wage is going to affect somebody in my family, that's an easy call.
Is it because there are 90% of the economists? 90% of the economists, if you line them up, will tell you, the effect of giving up somebody a minimum wage in Illinois of $8.25, which is what it is, higher than the federal? It's to unemploy some people. Because you ever go to France? Folks, if you're a middle income guy, you don't go. But if you go to France, you go into McDonald's, and you know what? There are fewer people working there to take your order. You know who takes your order? A kiosk. They, in France, have priced your son, your kid out, and you want to price more of these out of the
But
market?
that's not, I'm not.
Do you think that Rauner could make that argument? Do you think you can make that argument?
I think it's hard I think the platform that he's laid out doesn't provide red meat to people in the middle. So, and there's going to be
And minimum wages, you think would
I
do
think
it?
that's part. I don't know that close the deal. I think it's part of it. But I want to
What
go
about
back
school?
to let's
Okay,
go back
go
to his
ahead.
thing. Let's
Okay.
go back to his stuff though.
Okay.
Again, in
Okay.
contrast, right?
Okay.
Term limits it's something that is debatable in terms of its impact, in terms of what it's going to do. We can say it's going to bring all these wonderful things. That's speculative. I might want it inherently, but what it's going to do, how it's going to turn around and help me in my pocketbook.
Well, what if he can connect those dots, then maybe there's
That's
something.
dots you got to connect, as opposed to I'm going to help you with health care. I'm going to help and you can say, well, I'm going to fix the economy, so I'm going to get your job. So that is going to be his challenge, is how he appeals to, and it's no longer these sets of
What if he
hardcore
just
Democrats
says?
and hardcore
What if he says to
Republicans.
people, "How's this line? Remember this line? Are you better off today?
Right.
That vote will be in November, 8th, something like that, 2014. Say, folks, are you better off today, November 8th, 2014, than you were on November 8th, 2010? Because you've had my opponent there, Pat Quinn, for the last 4 years. How do you think the people in Illinois answer that? You think they're better off?
Well,
they should be a lot better off.
That's a good question. But so I do think that's what he will. So he'll take the things that he's talking about and package it in, like, I'm going to make you better off. And I think that
But
gets
even
to
here-
that gets to Quinn's.
Here's even a better question. Look around you. Look at the growth that's taken place in Iowa. Look at their unemployment rate. Look at the unemployment rate in Wisconsin. Look at the unemployment rate in the other surrounding states. Are those people getting better off faster than the people in Illinois?
But his issue is he's got to convince people he can do that. So it's not just to say that's a problem. Everybody gets it's a problem. He's got to be convincing that he can do it, and not just from a business
because that's
standpoint.
your point. He's got to make this a referendum on Pat Quinn. If he makes it a referendum on Pat Quinn, he wins.
But Pat
Quinn wants to make it a referendum on Bruce Rauner.
To close the deal, this is my point I'm making. To close the deal, it just can't be that, and that is his challenge.
It has to be positive.
He's got to offer something that people believe in beyond, I'm going to fix everything.
Well, you're right in that sense, because people said that's what Republicans have done wrong in the past. That's what they did wrong in 2010. They said this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, talking about Democrats, but they never said what you're saying. This is how I make your life better.
And it's a fine line, because we can't go off and talk about everything, all the details you want, but he's got to present it. On the flip side, that is Quinn's problem is how does he, on the flip side, how does Quinn win this race? And his problem is, how does he say he is going to fix these problems when he's been in the office so long? Obviously, and he's going to
right. Does he have to dance it? He's going to point to accomplishments.
Yeah,
what are the accomplishments of Pat
pension?
Quinn?
He's going to say pension.
Pension reform.
Pension reform. He's going to say gay marriage. He's going to say brought jobs. To the
brought jobs. What's the unemployment rate in Illinois? Is it higher than other states or lower? It's the second highest in the country. How does he make that argument?
I'm just saying that's what he's going to talk about. He's brought jobs here.
Even though it's not true. He's not brought as many jobs here as the governor of Michigan brought to Michigan.
So that's the balance. He's going to be speaking to those things and getting people to believe that he is continuing to do it. So that's his challenge. And it's going to be, my other point about this race is it's going to be extraordinarily close, and it'll be California in proportions in terms of the money that gets spent.
It'll be what? Oh, California, that kind of money. So we're talking $30–40 million at least for the governor's race?
Well, if you count both what each campaign does and the outside, I think it breaks $50 million.
$50 million.
I think, yeah.
And does the national parties? We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Dennis Gragert, right?
Yes.
He is the publisher of dailywhale.com. Obviously, he knows a lot of politics. Obviously, you folks should be reading this. Not just go to the website, because if they just go to the website, they're just going to miss things that they get in their morning newsletter and their afternoon newsletter. Right. And it is about politics, it is about government, it is about business in the state of Illinois, in the county of Cook, in the city of Chicago. So does your entity basically show that pay-to-play is still alive and well in Illinois, because people are really, I'm not knocking it, but they have to know what's going on in county and the city so they can really pay the right people almost to get the business?
Oh, no.
That's too harsh?
That's I mean,
well, if they see a request to bid, do you think they just submit it and then the good guy gets it? Okay.
No, I think.
Do you think the city services always go out on bid contracts, the county services always go out on bid contracts, the state? Or do you think there's a lot of pay to play? People give money and then they get influence and they get business.
My experience is, while there is pay to play exists in the government, for the most part, it's a very small part of what happens. The impact is significant in terms of its cost, so I don't want to diminish its cost, but in terms of actually how much business is transacted because someone gave some a campaign contribution and someone got a contract.
We would be remiss if we didn't say, we talked about the governor's race, and people should be very critical of me because I guided this, and we didn't talk about education, or school choice, or school vouchers, or charter schools. 1 out of every 5 kids in the Chicago public schools who's black reads at grade level, 4 out of the 5 kids don't. How about if Rauner, who's big on school choice, makes that an issue?
Well, that's one of those things I think he can deliver, and I think you'll probably hear a lot more about it. And that's the one
about more charter schools, maybe even school vouchers, school choice, competition, innovation, because that the middle-income guy cares about. And also he wants.
You should be consulting him. That's a really, when you have him on, you should tell him, because they're
well,
probably
I'm fair
smart
and
enough
balanced.
to.
I would tell Pat Quinn how to admit that Paul Vallis is almost a personal friend. I mean, seriously, I'd tell anybody. They are wise. They ignore me completely. No, seriously, I don't know any of this stuff. You know this stuff. That's why we had you on here, Dennis.
No, but I think that's a good point, that education is something that he will speak to and try to use as that appeal.
Bruce Rauner. And he may win. Win or lose, who wins? Rauner or Quinn? End of the day.
I'm not going to pick it right now. There's too much to go. It's a long campaign. What I will say is